Well, folks, we are just 13 days away from the first two debates of the 2020 election, and they're being held right here on MSNBC along with NBC and Telemundo. And tonight, we now know the 20 Democratic candidates who made the cut to participate in that two-night event. They are as follows. Take a deep breath here. Ready? Colorado Senator Michael Bennet, former Vice President Joe Biden, New Jersey Senator Cory Booker, South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg, Texas Congressman Julian Castro, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio, former Maryland Congressman John Delaney, Hawaii Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, California Senator Kamala Harris, former Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper, Washington Governor Jay Inslee, Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar, former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke, Ohio Congressman Tim Ryan, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, California Congressman Eric Swalwell, Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, self-help author Marianne Williamson, and former tech executive Andrew Yang. Julian Castro, of course, is a former HUD secretary. The candidates will be split into two groups of 10, sorry about screwing that up, who will participate in two separate debates held over two consecutive nights on June 26th and 27th, with moderators Rachel Maddow, Lester Holt, Chuck Todd, Jose Diaz-Balart, and Savannah Guthrie. The DNC decision to cap the participants at 20 based on their standing in polls and how many donations they've received left four fairly big name contenders off the stage, including Montana Governor Steve Bullock, whose campaign maintains that he should have been included. The job of whittling down the candidates is not an easy one. Here to talk about who got in and why is the chair of the DNC, Tom Perez. Well, let me just start, Tom, by saying I don't envy your job, I'm saying that honestly and not as flattery. Like, it genuinely seems you have a hard problem on your hands to figure out the best way to do this. Is there some part of you that looks at, say, Governor Bullock or Congressman Seth Moulton, who are, elected representatives in good standing of the Democratic Party? Steve Bullock, he's the only statewide elected, I think, from a state Trump carried, and think, well, it's kind of a failure on our part that they're not included.
Well, first of all, Chris, I'm looking forward to partnering with NBC and Telemundo, MSNBC in less than 2 weeks. And, this job has its challenges, but I wouldn't want to be anywhere else because we're taking back our democracy. And, Steve Bullock and Seth Moulton are two people I know and respect and like, and I worked with when I was Labor Secretary. And so it certainly isn't easy when we have to do these things. At the same time, we drew these rules and we announced these rules months ago. We did that because we wanted to give every candidate who is in a fair shake and fair notice. And that's exactly what we did. And so this does not preclude them from making the debate stage next month. And if they do, we will welcome them with open arms.
So we got 20. It's going to be divided over two nights. You made a very early decision, which I think is a commendable one, of not having a kind of like poll-based tiering, right? So there's like the kids' table debate, as it was called last time around in 2016. This is a sort of strange question because I work here at this network that's working in partnership with you. I have no idea how this process is being run. It's above my pay grade in quite a literal sense. There's some group of people that are doing it, but it's not just a draw, right? I mean, there's some process being done here so that it's neither tiered, but also some sense of kind of balance between the two nights. Is that the basic idea?
Sure. The challenge that we're trying to, the needle we're trying to thread, Chris, is that we want to make sure that we maintain 2 nights where we have maximum eyeballs.
Yep.
We didn't want to do JV varsity. Yep. And at the same time, if you simply throw 20 names into a hat, so to speak, and pick them out randomly, we run a risk of, just through luck of the draw, having folks who have been polling near the top all on one night. And so what we did, again, in consultation and together with NBC, MSNBC, Telemundo, is to look at a two-tier draw, if you will.
I see.
And a number of people who are above 2% will be in one category and below 2% in another. And if that number, for instance, is, say, 8 who are above 2%, we don't know I don't know the exact final number, but let's say it's 8, then you'll have a draw from those 8. You'll have 4 and 4. 4 will go one night, 4 will go the next night, and similarly from the other 12, you'll have 6 go one night, 6 go the next.
So you don't end up in a situation, which just so that I understand this, right? You don't understand a situation because there's some clustering at the top. You know, there's about 4 or 5 or 6 candidates who are sort of above, say, 5%, and then there's a whole bunch that are below that threshold. So the idea you're talking about 2% is that you don't end up with just through sheer lottery, like the 4 top people
Correct.
polling in one night and not on the other night, that you sort of make sure that there's a mix, essentially, across the sort of spectrum of polling on both nights.
That's exactly right, and that's why we're going to have, in effect, a draw of one set of participants and then a draw of another set of participants, and that's how we try to solve for this goal that we have, which is we want to, both nights, we're going to have great people on the stage, and I want to make sure that everybody is watching Wednesday night and Thursday night.
Let me ask you a personal question. As I'm talking to you this, I mean, I've known you for a long time. I've interviewed you many ways. For a while, you were a civil rights lawyer at the Department of Justice. You were a secretary of the Department of Labor. You've worked in government. This just seems like a completely distinct and strange enterprise to be running that you find yourself in. Like, what is your life like right now trying to manage this thing?
Well, I'll tell you, here's why I ran for this job. Our democracy's on fire, Chris, and it's a 5-alarm blaze. And after November the 8th, 2016.
The way you're dealing with that is that you're having to parse out, who's got the 1% polling. It's just a very hard problem that you've set yourself to.
Well, they're challenging times, but you know what? Our North Star is always fairness. I know I will disappoint some folks. If I'm a fan of Steve Bullock's, I'm disappointed now. And I understand that, which is why we're going to continue to make sure that everybody, and I'm confident that he's going to continue to campaign hard. But we've got to make sure that everybody at the end of the day understands that what our North Star was that everybody got a fair shake. We set forth the rules early, transparently. We didn't change the rules in the middle of the game. There was a very strongly held view by many, many people in 2016 that these rules were designed as an effort to help one candidate over another. And we're not doing that here. And I hope people see that. They may disagree with some of our decisions, but I hope they see that what we're doing every single day is to make sure that this incredibly talented group of candidates, everybody gets a fair shake to communicate their vision. And then we're going to talk about issues in less than 2 weeks. We're not going to be talking about hand size. We're going to talk about health care and climate.
That's a fair prediction.
The critical issues.
All right. Well, like I said, you have a very hard job. I think you're handling it with aplomb right now, DNC's Chair Tom Perez. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great night.
You too. Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.